Well, good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon. Welcome to another Conversations with Dune and Friends, another episode here. And we have a wonderful friend joining us from the Ontario area. He will tell you more about that when he joins us in just a moment here. And we have Greg Schinkel joining us. And hope you're enjoying your day today, and grab a coffee, grab your favorite tea or whatever have you, and join us. Join us for a wonderful conversation with Greg here for an hour and a bit. And the more of you that join us, the more interesting the conversation will be. But we certainly have lots to talk about with Greg today. But let me do a quick introduction of Greg's background so that you know who you're hearing from. And folks, again, feel free to interact with us through the comment section on the Facebook video that's live right now that you're watching. So just comment right in there, and we'll be able to feature your comments and interact with you. Greg Schinkel, CSP, is the 2020 National President of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. Greg owns and operates, in a partnership with his wife, Robin, two leadership training companies: Unique Training and Development, which he purchased in 1992, and Frontline Leadership Systems in Dearborn, Michigan. Greg is the author of co-author of 5 books, so either author or co-author of 5 books on leadership, including What Great Supervisors Know and Employees Not Doing What You Expect, and Fusion or Fizzle: How Leaders Leverage Training to Ignite Results. His feeder podcast and Frontline Leadership YouTube channel helps leaders become better at driving results and maximizing employee engagement. Along with a team of 6 instructors, Greg and his team have been selected by large organizations like Kimberly-Clark, Unilever and Colas Canada to train their leaders in Canada and the USA. Greg is a graduate of the Richard Ivey School of Business, and outside of the work, Greg is a private pilot and a member of his Rotary Club. Friends, please help me in welcoming our wonderful guest today, Mr. Greg Schinkel. How are you today, my friend? Greg, how's the weather over there, Mike?
Dune, it's such a pleasure to see you. It is right around the freezing mark today, and we're hopeful we're getting a little thaw to get the little snow off the ground.
Yeah. Well, it's been a while since I've seen you. I guess every year we see each other at convention there, at our CAPS convention. And I was looking forward to seeing you in Calgary, but it's not going to happen this year. We're going to be virtual. So I'll be seeing you like this in December here for our national convention. But, or should I say, well, I was waiting for your birthday where I can actually sing you "Happy Birthday, Mr. President." That would be a cool song to sing. I won't be quite as good as Marilyn Monroe, but I could.
You've got her hair going there, dude.
There you go. I got her hair. I just got to get some other parts. But all right, so Greg, we're going to have a lot of fun, my friend. Hopefully you're not against fun. You're a fun guy, aren't you?
Well, it's funny, Dune, because I think, half the people that might end up watching this would know me to be more of a serious business guy, and the other half know I'm a complete silly goofball. So I'm all that in one package.
Let's bring the entire package today, my friend. Let's bring your entire package, and let's just share with our folks out there who might be watching now or later. And so Greg, tell us a bit more, a bit of an expanded kind of backgrounder beyond the bio. Just tell us how you got into this point, my friend. Expand on any points that you like to on that timeline there.
Let's go back to my birth at St. Joseph's Hospital here in London in 1967. Actually, I was lucky, dude, in that I had a great childhood and have been born and raised in London, Ontario. I've lived here most of my life. I did end up going to school in Michigan after high school ended. And so I went away for school in Michigan, and then I worked in St. Catharines, Ontario, which is near Niagara Falls. And I worked for General Motors. So, to me, as I grew up, I was always, they say that the traits that you have as an adult can usually be, many of them can still be traced all the way back to your childhood. Mm-hmm. And I think one of those traits was I was always, first of all, my nickname, in elementary school was Smiley. In fact, I think they called me Guy Smiley, like the character on Sesame Street in the Muppets, because I generally smiled a lot. I was a happy kid. I liked to goof around, play, and I also got interested in acting in plays in school, and then eventually got into the campus radio station, got into that end of things. I even looked at whether I should quit university and start a radio station. My dad actually put me in touch with somebody who says, that's not a good idea. That's not as easy as you think it might be. So then I continued on, got my business degree. And so along the way, I actually, while I was away at school, I actually met my wife, Robin, and we got married in 1989 after a torrid and passionate relationship for about 1.5 years. And then, so we've stayed in London, and I happen to, have a job like you do, where, part of the job, aside from the current COVID situation, is to, get on airplanes and go places and talk to people. So, my background is really, I do a lot of reading. I said to you when you were setting this up, I said, I don't think I have a very interesting life outside of business, because a lot of what I read is about business. A lot of my day is consumed with business. And so I don't have a life, but we'll see if we can, excavate some things out of there.
Oh, I think we can. Now, I must maybe point out a couple of things that I heard that was interesting. One of them is, you said your nickname was Smiling. So was mine throughout college. I was nicknamed Smiley, and it was just given to me based on my smiles.
And I can see that, because every time I've seen you, you're always in a pretty good mood.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. You mentioned not only business and the serious side of you, and I certainly can appreciate that. You're a shrewd businessman, and you've had your ups and downs, and you've shared some of those stories with our CAPS members, and really appreciate the journey that you shared there. But the first time I met you was actually, I think somebody was either hypnotizing you or you were on stage with some bands or we were, so I actually saw the goofy side of you first before I saw the business side of you.
I would say, Dune, that anybody who met me at CAPS conventions probably wondered if I even had a business or if I just wandered in off the street. Because most of the time I viewed things like going to the speakers convention as a time to kind of let loose and just hang around people that are in the same business. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that I gave people that impression when they first met me, that I was actually operating a pretty substantial training business. Mm-hmm. Because really, I was just there to let loose and have fun, and of course, pick up a few ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as they say, once you mastered a certain area, you can then relax a little bit. You can relax a little bit. It doesn't have to be serious all of the time. And I think we all learn that throughout our journey. Is that yes, there's this time to be serious about work and business and whatever have you, but there's a human element too, right? There's a
I was thinking, I know that one of your passions is music, and I was thinking, I've loved music all the way along, and in fact, I've played instruments, but I don't know that they would be instruments. I think the one time you met me, I actually jumped up with the CAPS band, the loose group of characters, and I was air guitaring the bass. But really, I remember back in the late 70s, and this may have happened to other people, is you would get solicited by instrument salespeople. So I remember this guy coming to our house and talking to my parents about what instrument I might play. And, at that point you're maybe getting excited. Maybe it'll be guitar or it'll be piano. And no, we went with the accordion, because it's such a powerful instrument that, you just want to break out at parties. So I actually studied the accordion and went through accordion lessons and played accordion for a few years. And then when it got to be, when you could choose an instrument in school, I actually chose the trumpet, and I played in the stage band for a little while. Cool. But unfortunately, and now I have a guitar, Dune, and so I will not bring it out, because I am so poor at changing chords that it's not something I can say is a strength of mine. So, but it is an interest of mine. I'm envious of people that can play music, because I did love studying music and playing music when I was younger.
Yeah, fantastic. So I'm going to ask you to share a story to kick us off into this sort of diving deeper. The first story that, actually, no, you decide. One of the stories that I would love to hear from you is how you came to owning your own business. However much detail you want to get into that, that would be a cool way to kind of get to know you a little bit. Tell us about that story.
Yeah. So, I don't think anybody, when they're in school, I shouldn't say anybody, because I'm sure maybe kids of speakers might say that someday they might want to be a professional speaker. But that wasn't, when I was a kid, I actually thought I was going to become an engineer. And my dad was working at General Motors. In fact, he had a 30-plus year career there. So when 1986, when I'm graduating from high school, I'm looking at my options, I thought, okay, well, my dad had a good career at General Motors. Maybe I'll look into that, because GM, maybe prior to 1986, had owned a university in Flint, Michigan, of all places, called GMI Engineering and Management Institute. So I applied there like I applied to other Canadian universities. And part of the admission process was you submitted your grades and you were accepted academically, but then you actually had to go and get hired by one of the GM plants or one of the other manufacturing companies that would sponsor you. And so I became a co-op student, and I went to school in Michigan for 3 months. Then I would go drive down and live in St. Catharines for a few months, working at the GM factory there, and back and forth I went. So it was a great experience because, as a young man, I knew very little about factories and how things worked. And I did that for a few years until I met my wife, Robin, and then I moved to London, went to the Ivy School of Business, which is located at the University of Western Ontario here. And then when I graduated, or getting close to graduation, my dad, who had taken an early retirement in '87 to start Unique Development Corporation, he said, look, if you want to, and I, by the way, I had worked, I should point out that when I met Robin and I made the decision to go to the Ivy School of Business and transfer my credits over from GMI, I had a gap because I had to quit GM in December, which would be midway through the academic year. And then I had to wait until the next September to go to the Ivy School of Business. And I had to take one class. I received advance admission, which back in those days was almost unheard of. So I was told that I would get in if I just got a minimum grade in this one class called Biz 257. So during that 9-month period, I had to have something to do. My dad had started this training business in '87. So it's 89, 88. And so I sold for him on straight commission. So we would open the Yellow Pages and call companies and see if we could sell enrollments in sales courses and management courses. And so I guess I earned my chops in the speaking business just selling on straight commission for about 9 months. And I made okay money doing it. I did it well enough that I think he saw the potential in me. And then, of course, I went off to Ivy and I ran, at Ivy, they had a small business consulting program as part of the business school. And I was in their undergrad program. So kind of like being a camp counselor, the 1 year I was one of the consultants on the team. And then the next year I was brought on as the manager. So technically I'm now done my degree, and I'm managing the small business consulting group. I'd also had the GM experience. So my dad said, look, if you want to come in, because he took early retirement when he was 55. So 5 years after starting the business, he said, look, if you want to come in, you can buy me out. So in July of 91-ish there, when my management job was done at the small business school, or this business school, I joined him. And what I didn't know when he said, I'm going to sell you the business, is he meant 6 months later. So it was February of 1992. And, I'd only worked in the company for maybe 6 months. And he said, I'd like to sell you the business. At that point, the capital gains exemption was being questioned, whether they were going to change that. So there was something advantageous for him to sell me the company. So he's 60 years old. He sells me the company. And now I'm the boss, and I have president on my business card. And I'm 25 years old. I'm just, fresh out of school. And so, yeah, that's how I came to buy the business. At the first, he sold it to me for a price that was unreasonable, but I didn't know any better. And then later on, we adjusted the price to probably something that was a little bit more realistic. But I guess and many people in the speaking business know this about me, is that I didn't have to start my speaking business from scratch. He went through a lot of the course design and hiring commission salespeople. And so when I came into the business, the foundational elements had already been there. And what I had to do is use my genius that I learned in business school to see if I could grow this thing and make it bigger over time.
And you did, and certainly it's not our journey without its challenges and ups and downs, and you shared some of those with our fellow CAPS members, but really kudos to you for thriving in even very difficult times of either COVID or other recession that we had before. So it's definitely quite a robust business that you continue to build there.
One thing, Dune, that going through hardships, and just maybe a quick dive into that sort of less prosperous period. So I was, again, people who know me are likely watching. I was more full of myself back then than I am today, if you can believe that. But I thought I knew a lot. And so I was using all my, quote, business school smarts. I finished near the top of my class at Ivy, and I really liked sales and marketing. And so I thought, okay, we're going to really grow this thing. We're not going to have this really small business. We're going to grow it into be a big business. And so over the years, I increased the number of offices we had. We added people. We had always had this, our core business has always been training frontline supervisors in manufacturing. But then what we did is we branched out and we took a few, of these little squirrel paths, right, where you see something looks interesting. And we had customers, especially back in the 80s, back in the 90s, asking us about ISO 9000. So we got into those quality systems and documenting them, and that kind of helped us grow the business. In fact, the ISO business at one point dwarfed the leadership training business. And then, we were into value engineering and process mapping and all sorts of different courses and consulting, HR consulting, financial analysis consulting. And in the end, the overheads were just enormous. We had to really bring in a lot of money just to break even every month. And so that all kind of the roosters came home to roost in 2004. And fortunately, I was very fortunate that my dad was there to support me at that point, because he was very philosophical, dude. He could have easily said, what are you, some kind of failure? And instead what he said is, look, you gave it a good run. Why don't you look at your options and see what else is out there for you. So I actually looked at going back to school, getting a master's or PhD, looked at what that really entailed and what kind of life that would be, and thought, no, that's not for me. And I looked at just going to become a manager at one of my clients. And that really didn't appeal, because once you've owned your own business, it's very difficult to work for somebody. Not that you can't, it would just be very difficult. And so at that point, he was there and he said, look, I'll support you. And because the business was insolvent, that is, we couldn't pay back part of our business loans at that point, we didn't have to go bankrupt, but we basically had to recapitalize the business. So in a strange twist, my dad had to start a new business, very similar to the old business. And then I bought that from him 2 years after that. So actually I bought the business twice from him. Dude, he's 88. I won't do it to him again. I decided, no, I'm not going to go that way. But one thing, when you go through really difficult times, personally, financially, relationship, whatever it might be, even though at the time you can't appreciate it, when you get some distance from it, it's so helpful in a way. I mean, to some degree, it probably keeps me more risk averse these days than I would have been back in those days. But when COVID hit, and even after 9/11, back actually 08, 09, before that 9/11, all these things were basically where the business comes to a full stop. And I know that they have for many speakers as well. And one thing, when you've been there, when you didn't have any money and you didn't have any savings, and in my case, you had a lot of debt at that time in the mid 2000s, everything else, you get a different context for it. So it's not that I didn't get glum back in March when my schedule started to evaporate. But, at the same time, as we knew better, we did actually have some savings and reserves. It's a strange business, the speaking business. You can go on quite a run for a while and you make lots of money and you can save it. And then there are times when there's just no revenue coming in. And that happens whether you're running a small business or a bigger business. So, you know what, I hate to say it, one of the best things that's happened to me is having my business fail in the mid 2000s. It really set it up for the success that we've enjoyed today.
Yeah, critical lessons. You know, when I graduated from my MBA, I thought, just like you did, I thought I learned a lot of good stuff, but you don't really learn it until there's some pain attached to the lesson. Right?
My friend, I think you should, that's the secret of accountability, right? I mean, you're not really accountable till your butt's on the line and you feel some pain from it. That's when you know you're accountable. It's kind of like this promise that you've made to someone.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for sharing that story, Greg. And it's we have lots of other aspects to talk about, including further on business and all that. But let's get into your family side of things for a moment. So you met your wife, Robin, long ago. Tell us about your family. I think I have some photos here to share with our viewers when you...
Sure, yeah, you've got pictures of Robin and I and the kids. Yeah. So again, Robin and I met here in London, 1989. In fact, for those that attended the CAPS convention, our blind date, although Robin says she wasn't set up, but I feel like we were. But anyway, was right across the corner almost from where the convention was held at the London Convention Center. It was, at that time, it was called the Elephant and Castle. Now I think they call it the Fox and the Fiddle. It's a bar restaurant area, and so we met there, and it was a passionate, torrid relationship, and I was still living and going to school in Michigan and also in St. Catharines. So I drive back and forth, and that's what caused me to say, okay, I proposed actually after 6 months of dating. So I proposed in the winter of 1988, and then we were engaged and then married a year later in December of 1989. So and then we had a few years there where we were doing well. I'd finished. She actually finished school before me, so she got a job at London Life, which is a big insurance company here in London, Ontario, and so she supported me. I finished my business degree, and then we had the opportunity to buy the business from my father, so we did that, and she supported me all along the way, even through the ups and the downs of that. We ended up not having kids until, I guess, probably 5 years later or so. My son Ryan was born. And Ryan, looks a lot like me, although he grows a lot of facial hair, so that people may not necessarily always see that resemblance. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, Robin and I have been married for, it's 31 years coming up here in a couple of weeks. And and my son came along, and then my daughter Rebecca was born a couple of years after Ryan, and so she's turning 23 here in actually next week. So our family, we had a boy and a girl, and our family was very complete. And then the picture that you're showing right now is Robin and I on the balcony of we bought a condo about 6 years ago in a place called Grand Bend, Ontario, which is right on the shores. It's on the eastern shore of Lake Huron. It's only 50 minutes from our house in London, where I am today, and so it's great. It's easy for us to come back and forth. The internet there is good. It is an apartment condo. It's right on the beach, so we can go out on the balcony. Strangely enough, Dune, I don't like the beach, and I don't like the water. So people would probably be shocked, appalled, and disappointed that I did not go into the lake once this past year. I don't mind swimming out off of a boat, but I don't really want to go through the hordes of people to the beach, especially this year. So my son Ryan there on the right, my daughter Rebecca on the left, and Robin behind me there. So again, we like to have fun together and hang out. Because I'm, Guy Smiley, slightly reformed, I love to kid around and tease. And our family probably has this way of dealing with all sorts of different news, good and bad, as we joke about it. And so inevitably we get a lot of laughs with each other. Yeah.
So that is so meaningful when your spouse is able to take that journey with you through the, again, as they say, for better or for worse, and really through really tough times there with business, and I can imagine with finances and all that, and to be able to overcome that and to be able to really excel. That's quite the story there.
Yeah, well, the one thing, I make light of it now. I kind of gloss over it a little bit, kind of like putting icing on a cake. It's the reality is, it was bad enough there. I thought that we would lose our house because we personally guaranteed that debt. And as it turned, and I remember calling clients of mine who actually had what I thought was decent liquidity, and I was saying, "Hey, do you want to buy my house and rent it back to me?" So that's pretty serious stuff. And so along the way, and every relationship has ups and downs, but the one thing, because up until that point, I was really, even though we were together, Robin's raising the kids, I'm kind of out there doing the business thing, is I've noticed that our relationship has gotten a lot closer lately, and now we go out of our way to do things together. And so this is a photo. We planted some trees as the thank you gifts from the CAPS convention last year in London, Ontario. So this is just maybe a month ago or 6 weeks ago. And we and by the way, you'll hear my dog potentially in the background. He's excited to be with me here. But so we planted trees, and that kind of connects to a sense of service that I also developed over the years. And so, yeah, we're planting trees here. The weather was quite nice there. And this was, again, the trees that were thank you gifts for the speakers at the convention last year.
Yeah, it was, the convention that was in your own backyard was really our last convention before COVID, right? So yeah.
Now, a little insider for any of the CAPS members who are on with us today or watch the recording of this. So I got to say that nothing creates more tension than when you're the president of the organization and you're waiting through the banana ceremony, which this year, for those who are attending, is all being done virtually. But there, you're backstage and you're going to deliver this 6 to 7 minute speech. That's the most nerve-wracking I've ever seen. And my son Ryan did graduate, so like everybody, he had some ups and downs too with his education, but he actually got his bachelor's degree, and we're just now, I think, a couple of days away of finding out if he passed the CPA exam, which is a milestone. But he moved out. We helped him get his own place, and he lives with his longtime girlfriend, and only really about 15 minutes from where we live. So we're really proud, of course, of his accomplishments. So that was earlier this year.
That's fantastic. Our sons are in university and college right now, but the day when they graduate will be an awesome day for us, for sure. We'll enjoy that.
You know what? I know some people, obviously, who are younger than me by 10 years, and so they're dealing with teenagers. And some, of course, are even younger, and they have younger children. And I think, and probably anybody who's had kids knows this, every age has its blessings and its curses or challenges. And you know what? There's just so much enjoyment that can happen out of each one of those phases. The only thing is you got to get over some of the annoyances that maybe come along with it. Yeah. I can say, as many people have experienced, that even if you go through challenges, in the teen years or something, when they become young adults, it becomes really a pride-filled moment. I always thought, it was interesting, even if your kids are bratty in your own house, it was always nice to hear from other people how well behaved that they were. And that tells me that there was something right going on there.
Tell me his name again. I was just going to put it on screen here.
It's Ryan. So Ryan Schinkel. And so he's went with the millennial beard look there, but when he's clean shaven, he and I look a lot alike.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Well, thank you for sharing that.
And you know what, he's been very fortunate because in the accounting firm, first of all, it was good that he got into accounting, actually working for the accountant for our companies, and then he's now in a different firm. But he's been very fortunate to be in the cross-border tax group. And so he's really been specializing in working with the IRS and with Canadians that have U.S. Personal and business interests. So it gives him a nice little niche. And one thing that you and I know from the speaking business is the more that you develop a niche of expertise, the more valuable potentially you are, and maybe even the better your business gets.
You bet, absolutely. That's so exciting, to have that such early on in his career, because a lot of people don't discover that the power of that until much, much later in life.
Yeah, our daughter works with us in the speaking business. She does some things on the operational side of things, and she's quite, again, got a talent for graphic design. Ryan, so yeah, that picture with Rebecca there, and so there she is on the left. So she's got a really great spirit. She's actually both she and I have what's called Crohn's disease, which is a chronic condition in your gut. For me, it's pretty straightforward. I've had my ups and downs. I've had some surgeries over the years, but I'm basically clinically in remission. I do have to watch how tired I get and a little bit of what I eat. But she is, Rebecca has had Crohn's, but she's also had some of the other autoimmune things that go along with it. So she's had those health struggles up and down. She's also had some surgeries. So she works with us in the business, and she actually, she still lives with us here in our home and back and forth to our condo in Grand Bend. But again, what she has above all else is, despite going through tons of health challenges in her life, she's got that optimism, that bright light within her, and she still jokes around. So my wife, Robin, finds it very irritating sometimes when she and I are together, because we'll riff on some, what we think is something really funny, and we'll crack ourselves up, but Robin doesn't always agree that it's hilarious.
So she's a bit of a referee or a judge when it comes to funny.
I mean, you'd probably agree that you end up being a mixture of your parents somehow, right? You get certain attributes. So my son Ryan, my wife Robin has her math degree, so my son has more of a science and math background than I do. And Rebecca has more of the wordplay stuff that I've always enjoyed growing up. So I get to answer all the spelling questions in the house, and Robin gets all the math questions.
That's so fun, because our kids certainly when they were younger, they had all kinds of health challenges and different things to deal with. But it's so exciting and so rewarding to see them work through it, and to be able to embrace it, and to be able to not let that be a limiting thing. And so, it's just wonderful. Tell us a bit more about, your, when it comes to business, you do a lot of course, training is the core part of it. Tell us a bit more about the organization. I'm going to bring up your website perhaps as well, and perhaps you can...
Yeah. So that photo that you're showing there is a group of trainees at one of our clients down in the U.S. And about 3/4 of our business is U.S. based. It's changed a little bit since COVID, but actually I see it now shifting back more to be U.S. heavy again. So yeah, we do interactive workshops for these guys. Are supervisors, team leaders in a factory. I think in this particular factory they make tissue products, toilet paper. So these guys were doing well in COVID when all the toilet paper was getting bought. If you've ever been inside a paper mill, so to back up a little bit, when I was in university, we studied in business, we studied lots of different things, finance and HR and sales management, but I really loved operations, and I'd worked at the GM factory, right? And so I ended up being nicknamed Schmenner. Now, again, I'm Schinkel. So Schmenner was the author of one of the operations textbooks. So I was my nickname was basically operations. And I think part of it was because I'd been in an actual factory and worked there for a few years while I went to school for GM. I had interesting takes on cases. And so I really love Ivy. Anybody who goes to meetings with me knows that in conversation, I'm pretty quick and I can come up with things. And so the case study method with discussions really worked for me in terms of, my education. Now, this is one of the interactive activities, and, many of us will try to use experiential. This one is actually about leading by example and basically leading people through a maze. So again, we just try to get people up and off their feet. A lot of supervisors aren't used to sitting in a room watching a PowerPoint presentation. So we try to vary it with some physical activities as well. We, the business is focused on training supervisors. As I mentioned, in the early days, we got onto a whole lot of different bunny trails, following different opportunities. But the core has been training supervisors. And so when you do bring up the website, it'll become clear that we're really targeting especially HR managers in manufacturing there's my dog, to come and to basically check us out. So we decided to really double down, especially after the business was recapitalized in 2004, with the help of Jane Atkinson, who, as you know, is the author of The Wealthy Speaker and the Epic Keynote. She did some coaching with me back then, and she helped me figure out, leadership is your lane. And if you really want to dominate, you'll go even one layer deeper, which would be supervisors in manufacturing in leadership. And so that's been our niche. We've ridden that for a long time. And like everybody, when you do see the website, we just signed a contract to redo it. So I think anybody with a website says it needs to be redone. But you can see that our positioning statement there is the #1 trusted resource for HR professionals in training supervisors in manufacturing. So I like to say it's like when you say you're #1 on Amazon when you're 3 categories deep in the book section. So we're in a very narrow niche. We're fortunate because not many other people know how to speak to supervisors. They don't know the lingo in manufacturing. And so I know actually one of the things we fight against is companies have often used someone else or some other company to do training. And the guys, and I say the guys, the supervisors and the crew, they kind of have very attuned BS detectors. So I sense that a lot of clients, even when they're checking us out, want to make sure that we actually have the goods when it comes to talking to supervisors. And I think that we do. So, and our core program is a 2-day leadership program for supervisors. And most of the work that we've done with some larger companies has really just come from starting with one training project and having it go well.
Yeah, very, very cool. And that's probably how you came up with the frontline leadership training. That is a little bit of a brand, or is that the?
It is a brand, Dune. The business that I bought from my father, really, which I bought from him the second time, is unique training and development is the mothership, and then we own a company called Frontline Leadership Systems. And that company owns a company called Frontline Leadership Systems USA in Michigan. And much to my wife's chagrin, we do have a few different companies that are involved. And so there's lots of different bookkeeping. But yeah, Frontline Leadership, that was kind of what our course was called. And so I bought the URL, Frontline Leadership. But what we found when we studied it is that we still wanted to drive most traffic to uniquedevelopment.com. And that's the website we've had the longest, and that has the most organic search traffic to it. So even though I would have loved to redirect everything to frontlineleadership.com, the analytics taught me that no, we got to keep that main website at uniquedevelopment.com.
Yeah, you can't just move your whole operation to another city without losing some. It's like that. Moving a URL is kind of like that, right?
In the end, we have, I don't know, something like 30,000 visits a month. And what we're really fortunate on, Dune, and this is something and by the way, I'm not big on telling people you must do this. So people are in their speaking business or their own small business. But one of the things that I learned over the years being in CAPS, I've been in CAPS, which is the Professional Speakers Association for Canada. I just learned that you got to take your content and you got to publish it regularly. And I heard it year after year, session after session, speaker after speaker. We finally started doing it. And that's why now, if you check out our blog and our YouTube channel and our podcast, we've got all these like 4 or 5 minute videos on supervisory training. I don't do much in the way of keynote speaking. And in fact, most of our work is delivered by other members of CAPS or other members of the National Speakers Association, or eventually I think we'll have members from other Global Speakers Federation places around the world delivering some of our content. So, yeah.
So you're deep into videos. Tell us some things you learned in the whole regular video production, good things, and also mistakes that were made that that you want to help others avoid?
Well, the first thing I'd say, Dune, and it's probably one of the reasons I procrastinated it for so long, is there is this desire to have everything launch perfect, right? And so if people looked at the first videos that we created, which at that point were in a green screen in the basement of my media producer, they would see me reading from a teleprompter, which again, that's fine. I mean, you can use a teleprompter, but our marketing team is actually subcontracted to the Lisa Larder group. Lisa Larder is a member of CAPS, and she's a social media expert. And so I remember her telling me once, she said, "Greg, you're a professional speaker. Speak." In other words, don't necessarily read from a script all the time. And so these days, I just take some notes down, bullet points, and it follows a similar structure. So one of the things I'd say is, you get better over time, and you can't expect to come out of the gate being as awesome, whether it's a podcast or a video. I do think that, even in this studio, which is in my basement, we're actually looking at renting some space because we may have to deliver 2 virtual sessions simultaneously next year. But there's a backlight up here, so it gives some definition to your hairline, which is, if you watch any TV or movie, they're almost always lit from the top. It's just psychologically easier on people, and it separates you from the background. I'm using a pretty high-end boom mic here to capture the audio. We're using 1080p, what I would call prosumer, which is kind of in between consumer and professional level camcorders. And what I noticed, and by the way, not everyone should go out and spend thousands of dollars, but it's like, one thing I've noticed in this sort of COVID world where virtual is, when we do sales presentations using our studio, we stand out amongst anybody else that they're talking to. And the same goes when we're delivering training. I can't show it to you, but there's a flip chart kind of over this way that we can capture and do interactive things. We also made the decision that I wasn't going to try to teach and run a Zoom meeting and run the video camera. So we actually run it with a 2-person crew and an instructor. So lately I've been using another CAPS member, Ted Besner, who does a lot of work for me. He actually comes over here. He lives about 20 minutes from here. He comes over and he does the teaching. I run the Zoom call. Terry, my video media director, he runs the video switch in a production. And eventually we'll get those jobs done by many different people.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. So you're scaling it up, if you will. You're scaling it up. You don't want to just stay at a certain level. But again, to your point, start wherever you are, right? One of my
start wherever you are with whatever you've got. I mean, if all you do have is your laptop camera, or quite frankly, the iPhones, and I'm sure many of the Google devices, I mean, they have great cameras on them. There's lots of hardware you can get. Most people can at least get a ring light to light up their face properly. And, you can always add to the equipment later on. The one thing, Dune, that has been my philosophy for a long time in the business is, I'm a procrastinator. But if a customer buys something, I definitely will go forward, right? So when there's a sale made, there's a deadline. And that was the flyer this year was buying the studio equipment without knowing for sure whether there'd be any volume there. And then fortunately the volume did come. But I noticed a lot of customers weren't sure how the whole virtual training would even go across in their organization or be perceived. And it's turned out better than they thought. So, that again brings in more business for next year.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is from G.K. Chesterton way back when he said, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly, he says.
I agree. Everything starts poorly at first. When I look at some of this, even some of the stuff I wrote, I think one of the photos I sent you was our old newsletter that we used to mail out. So again, fortunately, back in the day, we mailed out a newsletter to our customer base because that's what you had to do if you couldn't email things. And that's our studio. That's a picture of the studio, and you can see the flip chart there on the one side. So we actually use a 3-camera setup the one camera is a low end one in that shot, but the other two are the kind of Canon. They're Canon XA11s for those people that want to know. And you'll notice the LED lighting at the top of the ceiling. So I was fortunate. Our basement was finished by the previous owner with that's the backlight that you're highlighting there. So we have backlighting on both sides, and the boom mic you can see kind of sticking down on the right side of the image there. The TV and the wood wall was there actually when we bought the place. So it just turned out. So knowing that we might not keep the studio in the house, we basically set it up and drop the lights from the suspended ceiling from the joists above. And then when we move out, which I expect we'll do in January, then we'll just take all that out and the basement will be back to being the man cave.
Hey, you know,
the recreation room for everybody.
Hey, with that kind of walls, you could probably do some video of, anti-gravity kind of a video, pretending that your wall is your floor.
That's an interesting thing.
Star Wars. You guys didn't do Star Wars, are you?
So I'm a Star Wars fan. This is my nephew, Ryan. So I have a son named Ryan. I have a nephew who's a year younger than my son named Ryan as well. And so that's in our condo in Grand Bend. And yeah, we make it a point to go out. Well, pre-COVID, we made it a point to always go to Star Wars movies, and quite frankly, most of the Marvel movies as well. So I would say we're big into pop culture. So doing even my music playlist probably looks like a teenage girl's playlist in a way, but it's there's nothing too deep there. And this is one of the things I appreciate about people like you and other colleagues and friends of mine. They have deep passions that they can get immersed in that have nothing to do with pop culture and work.
Yeah, well, we all have our thing. We all have our kryptonite, I guess.
I like to say that I have a very thin veneer layer of all the things. So this photo brings up, I talked about service earlier. And, when I came out of university, I actually, in my 20s, joined the board of the Victorian Order of Nurses, the VON, and they do home nursing care. And so I was on the local board in my 20s, became president of the board, joined the board of elders at my church for a while and, became chair of that group. And so, once you sort of identify as someone who can lead a discussion and so forth, you often get put into these roles. But after all that went, I joined Rotary probably, I think, around 10 years ago now. And this is those pictures are from the Rotary convention. So they put on a very large international convention. These photos happened to be in Toronto when it was here. But for instance, it was in Germany. It was in South Korea. So they move it around. Again, if many speakers speak at big events, this is a very big stage. I did not speak at the Rotary International Convention. But Rotary, the reason why I liked it is that it's a service club, but it's got a lot of community leaders and business leaders in it. So it's like quasi-business networking, but nobody has to give each other leads. But that one person's there from one of the accounting firms, and people are there, head of the banking divisions and so forth. And mostly, though, they're getting together to put on service projects to do projects in the community, build parks. And so I think a lot of people think that Rotary is this organization for retired white guys, in their 60s and 70s, but really it's a dynamic group of men and women, often who are leaders. And yeah, some clubs have weekly lunch or breakfast meetings. I happen to belong to a club that does a virtual meeting once a month from kind of across the region. So I was president of my Rotary Club in London a number of years ago, and then I've joined now a virtual Rotary Club where it kind of fits with my my normal travel routine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Hey, Greg, your sound change. I wonder if BeLive has selected a different audio source on you.
Let me just check.
Very cool.
Everything looks okay. So just let me know if I need to refresh.
No, you're good. You're good. The sound just changed a bit. I was just curious. I noticed the guys in the background with the tigers, of course, like this. Even here.
So this is Siegfried from Siegfried and Roy.
Yeah, I forgot the name there.
And we were in Vegas. We actually did a family trip to Vegas for Rebecca. She was 20. She turned 21 the previous December. So this was like in the January that followed. And we did a kind of what I would call a first class Vegas trip as a family, including my son and his girlfriend and our Robin's sister and her husband and family. And, we did the helicopter trip over the Grand Canyon. But here we just happened to go to the Mirage. They have kind of an animal conservatory area there. And Siegfried's there. I learned later on, I thought, hey, this is actually Siegfried, and this is like the Siegfried and Roy exhibit. And it turns out he hangs out there. So he's kind of like, he likes it when people come by and see him, and he did a little magic trick with us, and then he allowed us to have a picture. So it was just, we thought we were lucky. It turns out he goes there usually at least once a week.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I'd say, Dune, that's changing as life goes on. And we have some resources, is I do recognize, and I know a number of my business clients who've done well, they realize that then life changes from necessarily acquiring things to just creating interesting experiences. They don't all have to be really expensive, but that's what I look forward to doing after COVID dissipates. We were all supposed to go to Washington, D.C. for a big family adventure along with the National Speakers Association convention this year, but that got scuttled. So we'll have to do something again in the future.
Yeah. Just a minor check-in. Could you double check that your speakers are not generating sound there on your side?
What's interesting is I'm listening to you on my in-ear monitors, and I don't hear any sound coming through the speakers. Okay, so that's good. We're pretty good, not bad at all. But I just want to double check because the sound did change. I was just curious why. So I'm going to kind of pull back a little bit and tell us about lessons that you learned being a trainer and being a speaker. What would be advice you would give to people who wanted to make a career in speaking and training? If you distill it down to a few key pearls of wisdom, do you have some of those top of mind, Greg? Of course, I can always give advice. Remember, though, and this is a business where you're going to hear potentially lots of different advice from different people. And I've actually been a sponge for all the various advice and sessions that I've gone to. And if people said, what's the number one thing you'd tell somebody who wanted to, get into the speaking or training business? And I'm assuming it's not somebody from an entertainment standpoint, because there's a whole avenue of that if you're an entertainer. But if you're going to be a content type speaker, I would say you have to be able to take whatever it is that your specialty is, and you have to write about it. I mean, ideally, you should record it in video format or audio format. But you've got to get something down, because I believe now, especially since almost all of these things start with a Google search, that you have to have some sort of density of content so that people can find you. And I'm not even at this point saying being awesome at delivering that stuff would be a good idea too. But I think, every speaker can relate to the fact that their very first presentation was probably not their best presentation. But getting better on stage and in front of groups and getting better at storytelling, you can almost always see a new person when they come in the business, because they probably overdo it. They over dramatize, or they choose the wrong story or example for one of their early talks. And I remember one time as my career was going on, I had watched enough of these high energy speakers that motivate and turn to the person next to you and give them a high five and say, "You're awesome, you can do it." And so I tried that at a seminar I did. It just wasn't me. I'm not a rah person. I'm actually a cynic when it comes to some of that stuff. So it's bad if I tried to do it. Inevitably, though, in the early stages, you've seen enough people speak, you tend to pick a model almost and say, well, I like how that person does it, and that's how I want to be. Eventually, through a discovery of your authenticity, although we could talk about that a little bit more. If you could get to closer to something that feels natural for you, and people are going to pick up on that warmth as you deliver your message, that's going to be your final destination. But man, it's a total experiment as you go along. But I guess if my two tips would be, write about your expertise or record it somehow, and don't worry if you've got it perfect. And then the second thing is, of course, get good at delivering your message.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to push that further. And if you think about all of your kind of experience with speaking and training. Do you have a story top of mind? I want two stories. One is a bit of a highlight of your career where this was an awesome highlight as a speaker / trainer. And then I also want to maybe hear from you another story that maybe things didn't go so well as a speaker / trainer.
I got probably lots to choose from on both sides. The one that just jumped into my mind is, and this was our very first big contract we'd ever won. It was 2010. So we came out of 2008, 2009, like everybody else, our sales dropped off. And then 2010, things start to pick up again. And we get this really big contract with a packaging company. And, so I went around and I delivered, actually a fellow CAPS colleague of ours, Bob Parker, CSP, former CAPS president. He shadowed me on a bunch because he had to be my backup in case I ever collapsed and wasn't able to actually do this big contract. But I did deliver it all myself. And then I was in Wisconsin at one of the sites, and they were bringing me in to do sort of a follow-up session. And I was sitting and I was doing some interviews just to figure out, what they wanted me to cover. And I was interviewing people that had gone through our training program. And, it's easy in our business, especially when you're busy. You're going audience to audience, and you're not really necessarily, it's like the next gig. Probably a musician feels this way a little bit. Like I was in Detroit yesterday, I'm in Chicago today, and you may or may not really remember a whole lot from it. So anyway, I'm doing this interview, and this guy was a former Marine. I think he was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. And he nearly broke down in tears with me because he said, you taught me a lot that I never realized. And he said, I used to think that being a leader was barking out commands at people and being stoic and distant from him. And what you taught me was the warmth of leadership. And I got to tell you, not only did it help me at work, it helped me with my relationship with my family. And those are the kind of transformational stories that every one of us needs to do, because it brings us back to the core. People often wonder, why do you work with supervisors in manufacturing? First of all, I was a supervisor, but only for a couple of years at General Motors. I said, really, my mission in life now is just to see if I can help there be fewer bad bosses. So that would be one story that stands out. I still remember, by the way, winning that project. So I did my big pitch, and then I'm in the Atlanta airport, and then my phone rings, and they said, we really loved your presentation, but we have no idea who you are. So we need some references. And then if you said, what's one of, there's a number of humbling lessons and learning moments along the way. I remember doing some work in Sarnia, Ontario, not too far from here, an hour from where I live. And it had the potential for being a really big project with one of the biggest oil companies in Canada. And I went in and it just bombed. It bombed bad. And, the HR managers wanted me to use all sorts of fancy colors on the flip chart, and I didn't do that as much. And so they were disappointed, and they're giving me notes while I'm talking during the day. And I know, this is a train wreck that's happening. Right. And then it actually cost me business after that, because they said you didn't resonate or click with the audience. So that was a painful lesson, because I lost some future work that had been planned. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's certainly been other examples like that where it's a miss. It usually was a miss if I was reaching for some content that I wasn't an expert in. And because if it got beyond the superficial, I was going to be shown to not be the expert. And so there's probably a few cases like that, but I do remember that painful lesson. I also said something that wasn't appropriate in a session, and at the point everyone laughed, but then afterwards I'd heard that was maybe a little bit off base, and I actually had to apologize. So that was a bit embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, the hazard of live performance, whether it's in training or speaking or any other aspect of life, when it's all live and we're being human beings that we are, and we're trying to do something interesting and do something meaningful, sometimes we step beyond where our clients might want to be stepping. So
I found that because I have such a twisted sense of humor, that if I allow some of that to come out in an inopportune time, that's when it didn't work well.
Yeah. I'm going to flash through some more photos here, Greg. And so, I mean, you have a very wonderful and supportive family who's been through sort of the up and down of business there. But it sounds like you and your wife has really shepherded this company and in fact, multiple companies through a lot of different ups and downs, and definitely enjoying
it's important to keep in mind
your labor.
It's important to keep in mind that in the speaking business, we're probably considered to be, one of the bigger players, but really, in the grand scheme of things as a business, it's not like it's a mega corporation. Mm-hmm. So this is my dog and I looking out the window at our condo at the beach. His name is Dundee. And the photo that you showed with the four of us walking the trail there, every year we do what's called the Gutsy Walk, which is for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. And I know a number of CAPS members do make donations to help us out there. So we raise a few $1,000s a year, and usually family joins us. So we usually have about 30 or 40 supportive extended family members that come and walk with us and help us raise some money for that.
Yeah, the
tree planting for CAPS.
I'm no good with shovel. Are you good with shovel, my friend, or are you?
Not really good, Dune. First of all, you got to know that I outsource a lot of stuff, even that my business does. So you can imagine that necessarily landscaping and gardening isn't necessarily one of my talents. And I'm a big believer in buying back your time, but I think it would look bad if I hired people to go and plant trees for my volunteer work. So. So yeah, I work the shovel here. I will say I've tried the odd, home improvement project. Often it turns out okay at the end, and I do feel proud when I finally actually do it right. But I'm made for projects that can be done in about 20 minutes, and I think this tree planting took us about 45 minutes.
Yeah. Now I have a business question for you that I know you quite. Have a lot of expertise in that area. Maybe share just a little bit of a tidbit with our viewers about maybe how to win larger contract. As we early on in our career, we win a certain size of contract, and eventually we evolve to a point where we tend to go after larger ones. Are there some sort of lessons or insights that you gained through that journey that you can share with our viewers about what's the difference between small contract and large contract in terms of how you?
Well, first of all contracts are nice, dude. And if you're in business for yourself, and you need to win some work to pay your bills and so forth. I would say that the biggest difference in going after some larger contracts is just talking to organizations that have multiple locations, that have a lot of people attached to them. But, in our business or in the industry, the speaking industry, an association probably has hundreds of members that do business. And so there's already, a significant number of people that you could potentially go after. The other thing that we learned in pursuing some large contracts is because it scares you at first when you pursue some large piece of business, because in your mind, you're going, oh my gosh, this could be worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. And so I know the first one with the packaging company that we did in 2010, I was like, whoa, I over prepared. I went to locations. I did full color, management briefing books. I flew down and pitched it. And I don't do that anymore. I mean, I'll still go down and do presentations, but I found that I didn't need to do all of that stuff. The one thing that we did, though, is instead of writing a proposal that costs, again, hundreds of thousands of dollars, we tend to price our services by the person who attends our course, so that when the client looks at it, there's no big number in there. The number is usually under $2,000. And so, yeah, somebody has to multiply that by the number of people. The other thing we did is we just decided, like, all of our big contracts did not start as big contracts. They started as one class or a pilot group. And so the other thing you can do for bigger groups is start with a pilot. Clients like it called a pilot because it reduces their risk, and be easy to do business with and easy to scale. Now, the other thing that helped for me after I did that first contract all on my own is I realized that other people could teach my content. And I had an epiphany one time where I was onboarding a new instructor, or I guess he'd been working with me, but I was orienting him to some new content. So I'm sitting at the back of the room and I'm watching him and I'm realizing that I could be at home right now. He's teaching my content better than I teach it. And I could be making money, while I'm trying to sell the next contract. And so I would say that with larger contracts, you just have to believe that if you're adding value, it may be of value to more people. And yeah, that's the newsletter I was mentioning earlier. So we used to do this newsletter called Unique People, and my father is there in the black and white picture there. And there's our team, because even back in the early days, that was one of our offices that we rented, and we had a team of people. Many of them were either salespeople selling on commission, or they were subject matter experts in different areas. And so that was the team. That would have been about the right team probably when I took over the business, that group of people. So yeah, we did mailed out newsletters, and then now, of course, it's all by email and Twitter posts and all the social media platforms.
Which is a great segue into a question that I want to ask you. What's your take on social media and social media's platform, and how meaningful is it for business in general? Just want to hear your take on social media.
Well, I recognize the value of it, like everybody does. People are probably disappointed that I'm not on Facebook a lot, liking their posts and stuff, because it just isn't one of the things that I usually have built into my day. And I'm not judging anybody who does, because I know a number of, especially our colleagues, it's either good fun for them, and for them it'd be the same as flipping through a magazine, is looking through Facebook or LinkedIn. I find and by the way, one of the credos that we have learned in the speaking business is that you shouldn't publish the same content on every platform, right? It's tone deaf. And I know it's true, right? But my podcast is just the audio from my video, and my blog post is just the transcription edited from the video. And the only reason I do that is either maybe based in laziness, but it's also the fact that I'm not prepared to do, like, I'm impressed even with the level of effort in you setting up our interview today and how many of them you've done. So that's the other lesson, is like, you've got to do something, whatever it is, long enough to figure out whether it works or not. Some of the stuff that finally caught on for us were things that when we first started, like blog posts would be read by 10 people or 20 people. And then lo and behold, it only takes one giant packaging company to see the right post to create a seven-figure contract over a few years. So my take on social media is, like, you're not going to see me doing TikTok videos, but remember, I'm in my 50s. If I was in my 20s, maybe I would be doing something different. I tend to outsource all my social media work to the Lisa Larder Group, because they're experts in it. They're way better than I would ever be. If I put that on my to-do list, it would never get done. So I think it's absolutely essential, and yet can be a total waste of time. How's that for a take on social media? You have to be out there.
It's a powerful tool, but powerful tools can be dangerous.
Well, hey, back in the day, Dune, we had to spend money on Yellow Pages advertising and print advertising. So now you have to put some time into social media, because that's what's going to feed the juice to the search engines to create those opportunities. What you're showing there now is the Paul Harris Fellow Award that Rotary gives out if you've donated enough money. So one of the things I learned, Dune, is I'm not the kind of guy who normally will go out, like you said, and lift a shovel and hammer together stuff. And some people love that level of service. They want to do hands-on work. I learned that I'm good at generating cash flow generally, and that I give money away. I really love helping organizations like Rotary get better. I'm good at helping them figure out administratively how to become more efficient at what they do and training their leaders. But I'm probably less likely to volunteer to do the hands-on work. And it's just something I learned about myself. So one of Rotary's big projects is ending polio, which seems kind of quaint in the COVID world, but probably would surprise people to know that people still get and die from polio. Not very many, thanks to Rotary and the Bill Gates Foundation. But basically, we're going to have to go through something similar that we did to eradicate polio to get rid of this coronavirus.
Yeah. I have a family member that's dealing with the aftermath of polio from decades ago. So, polio was definitely affecting a lot of people back then. And thankfully, it's much less numbers these days. So you enjoy kind of kicking back there with some friends or colleagues?
So one of the nice things about business travel is Sandeep is the person in this picture, Sandeep Gugneja. He and I, interestingly, Dune, my friends are mostly from high school. Of course, I still live in London, Ontario, which is where I grew up. Sandeep is one of the friends that I met at GMI in Michigan, General Motors Institute. And so he lives in Seattle. So when I was out there, he and I got together for a beverage. And we don't see each other very often, but he's the kind of friend, and I think everyone can relate to this. You have those friends where you might text once, every few months, and then you see each other, and it's like instantly you're back to the rapport of when you hung out together in the dorm room at university or something. So Sandeep is one of those people. I feel like every time we talk, it's as if we just talked yesterday, even if it's been several months.
Well, that's fantastic. We definitely need those people in our lives for sure.
For sure.
And tell me a little bit more about you have purchased a business multiple times, and you've been involved in selling business and whatnot. And tell us, do you have any kind of insights gained from selling and buying businesses that people should be thinking about when it comes to whether it's a service business or a product business?
Well, first of all, I'm not an expert in buying and selling businesses. I paid too much the first time I bought the company, and then we reduced the price afterwards. I am, though, thinking, I am thinking about how to sell this service business that we're in eventually. And one of the best books I read in the last few years on that was a book called Built to Sell by John Warrillow. And in the book, he really talks about in the book he uses a storytelling method about a marketing agency. The person in the book had a marketing firm, and then eventually learned that they had to specialize in logos and just do logos, and they would do logos for 10 grand a pop, and then that was enough. They built that business up to several $1 million, and then they were attractive to a buyer. My dad bought a training franchise back in the day. He sold that training franchise. Then he started Unique Development. Then he sold it to me. My dad's a way better negotiator, I think, than I am. He's very good at it. And I think the hardest thing when you're selling a business is that what people are usually buying, and this is a challenge in the speaking business, which is why I use a lot of other folks to deliver my content, is I don't want someone to buy the business and then want me to work for it for 3 years after they buy it. I want somebody to buy it because it's profitable, it generates good cash flow, and that they can manage it along with any other management or admin people that I have attached to the business. So we're not there yet. As my accountant says, there has to become a management team of some kind, or basically we'll be selling the intellectual property. I know it has some value, the market for supervisory training. So if that is someone's goal, and by the way, we did buy a training business from someone once, but I think we paid less than $15,000, and even that, as it turned out, was too much because there just wasn't enough there. There was no active customer base to sell to. The program materials were probably good when that person delivered it, but not when we're delivering it. So it's hard to systematize your business to the point where someone else can look at it and buy it based on the multiples of the cash flow and profitability. And the other thing is, in most of the service businesses that are smaller, like our industry, I mean, a lot of us don't charge enough to build in a profit margin so that even if someone else was delivering it, you would still generate some profit at the end of it. And those were just painful lessons I learned when the business didn't do well. So I guess if you really want to sell a business, you have to be thinking about how you're going to package it probably a few years ahead of time. Or just recognize that it's not going to have as high a value. A lot of, I know some people right now that are selling a company, and I've coached actually clients in selling their businesses, and there is a really optimum time. Timing is everything, like selling a house and real estate. you have to be thinking about who the potential buyer is for that business. And you try to sell it after you've got a track record of making some good profits and growing profits over time so that there's a good story behind it. So right now we're trying to deepen our intellectual property so that there's enough there where people would either want to buy our book of business. But, we're still a few years away from that.
Yeah. Now I brought these, the photo of these books up to kind of ask you the next question, which is, so when it comes to writing, is that work or is that fun for you, my friend?
It's work. It's kind of like the biggest joke in our business or our industry, Dune, is making money in your pajamas or passive income. But I still like the best line I heard on that was, there's nothing passive about passive income. I was lucky because my dad was involved in the business, and after he sold it to me and he was in sort of semi-retirement, he had time to write. So he wrote Employees Not Doing What You Expect, which we went on to sell, 13 or 14,000 copies, which sounds really impressive until you realize that we did it by bundling it in with our training kits and, of course, selling those to customers when people took our courses. And then I wrote the little book, What Great Supervisors Know, it's like 48 pages. That book has actually generated more business because it communicates in such a basic, like what a frontline supervisor deals with, that anybody in an operations manager role would flip through it and go, this is just horse sense. This is common sense. And so we get work just based on people reading that book, which is why it's the giveaway on our website. The Fusion or Fizzle book, which is how leaders leverage training to ignite results, that was another passion project of my father and I. By the way, each book, the What Great Supervisors Know, I think I wrote it in a few days, but the other two books took months and probably really years. My dad's just written his autobiography, which I'm behind in finishing or helping him finish. So book projects take way longer than you ever think. Some of the colleagues that we have been good about churning out a book faster, quicker by being more disciplined in it. But the other thing is my dad really loves the idea that people are reading these books. And of course, we get some residuals from that each year. But what I told them is that even if you took all the book sales, which, still amounted to some dollars, it really pales in comparison to the training contracts. So really, in our case, the books are a way of taking our expertise. There's definitely something to be said, and I learned this through CAPS. For being an authority, it helps to have a book. Mm-hmm. People think it's amazing, even though any of us could do a book and get it edited and printed. It's just a calling card against somebody who doesn't have a book, right? So again, not that it's a must-have, it's just nice to have, but they do take time. I do have another book that I'm going to write on frontline leadership because it's in our niche, and we think we can build kind of an extended product family around it. But yeah, the Fusion or Fizzle book, I think, sold 50 copies. I think you can buy it on Amazon. But reality was it wasn't a big seller. So the big sellers are the other two books.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. So you love the outdoors as well, huh?
Yeah, this makes it sound like I'm a big outdoors guy, but that's probably not necessarily true. This was in Lake Louise, and my good friend from high school, my best friend, David Ballston, is there on the right. I'm on the left. And so, yeah, that's from midway up in Lake Louise, looking out over the mountains. It's just a clear, beautiful day. So again, the nice thing is, I think that we added this visit on when I was out scouting the hotel for the CAPS convention, because part of doing it is you go and you look at the different venues. And so this was an add-on to that, is that we drove out and we did a day of skiing. I have to say that I do like skiing and golfing, but my legs were burning because I'm used to Ontario hills, where you basically go down in 3 minutes and then you go back up on the lift. So my thighs were burning big time. I could barely walk after about 1:30 in the afternoon, but it was such a gorgeous day when we were skiing out there.
Hey, I was going to say, you guys look like you could be twin brothers there with the facial.
A lot of people have said that we look like brothers. And again, we definitely talk, I'd say every week or so. And so we've stayed close. He was the best man at my wedding. So, and I think I was the best man at his wedding. I should know that for sure. My memory is not as good as it was, but yeah, we've been close friends for a long time.
Well, it's a sign of wisdom to not be so confident.
I think I put that in my notes to you, that one of the things I learned, and it helps to have some business challenges, is that I think everyone's so focused on trying to be right and be certain. There's a lot of power in uncertainty. This is Dollar Tree. We won their national contract. So this was the team of instructors. I actually subcontract out to some Americans as well. And so we had to deliver to their 25 warehouses in a 2-month period, a couple of days of training each. So that happened a couple of years in a row. This is at Dollar Tree's headquarters in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but uncertain, I think, I've even realized that being uncertain in front of customers is totally fine too. This is my toy.
You don't want to be too uncertain behind the wheels of that car.
No. And this is a Cayman, and it's like, so it's not even the S model or whatever. I'm trying to downplay it here, Dune. But this is like a used car that they happen to be selling out of the dealership, so it looks brand new. But yeah, this is something that Robin and I have enjoyed driving the last few years. And it is one of our indulgences. I used to ride a motorcycle before my son was born, before Ryan was born. And every once in a while I've rented them. But we've agreed that a person in their early 50s, maybe motorcycle riding isn't the safest thing. So this was our compromise on that.
Yeah. No, I used to ride, I used to have a few motorcycles in my young days. And these days I just change them up for guitars.
Exactly. I think, you know what, I have learned that generally I'm getting more timid as I get older, and I think that's normal. Like even that ski trip, once that 130 came around, I said, I know I normally would be the guy that wants to go till the last lift run. My legs can't handle it, and I don't want to fall down and hurt myself.
Yeah. So tell me, as you drive this versus maybe your minivan or your SUV, what are the few words that come to mind? Just for fun. What few words that come to mind?
Yeah, you know what? This thing is it's a fun to drive. I mean, the color is gorgeous. Yeah. It looks different from what most cars are on the road. The sound of the engine, because it's a mid-engine, it's behind the driver. Like there's nothing. There's it's like music to your ears, and it really corners well. So I just have to say it brings a smile to my face. It's away now for the winter, of course, but getting it out in the spring, which is usually when I'd see people out on their motorcycles, and I'd be jealous because there's nothing like that first ride on your motorcycle when the weather turns nice in the spring. So this thing it brings a lot of joy. It's just quite fun.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier when you were young, your nickname was Smiling.
That's right. So this brings smiles.
There you go. It's
hard to frown. And I realized that, because sometimes people are looking at you when you're in a car like this. And I realized I got to look happy. I mean, I don't want anyone thinking that life is bad when you have this car. So.
Okay, I gotta ask. How long have you had it, and have you had any speeding tickets yet?
I have not. You know what? I'm going to touch wood as I say this. I've not had a traffic infraction or speeding ticket. I don't speed like I used to. It is very easy, so I use cruise control.
Yeah.
I have not had a speeding ticket in that car.
Good for you. Oh, this is a big deal. This is. Wow, it looks like an Olympic medal there, and it's very heavy, very substantial. Did they frame it for you, or did you?
No, my wife Robin framed it, and she pinned it inside that frame. So I got the CSP back. I think it's now almost 7 years ago at the NSA convention in Philadelphia, and I got it with Bob Parker, who's been longtime fellow London resident and chapter member here in the CAPS Association. And so we both earned it. And given when it was, so that would have been, I think, around 2013, the reason I went for it, because there's a lot of paperwork to fill out, especially back in those days. I think it's still the same. And so I put it off, even though financially we qualified. And then we had this big contract that I mentioned in 2010 and 11 and 12. And so I had the nice, easy, it was easier to do all the paperwork. So anyway, we got it. Once you've got it, it's pretty easy to keep it. But it's a distinction, because you have to have longevity and good customer reviews for a long period of time. So yeah, it was definitely a proud moment.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the certification in the speaking industry is the highest level of being certified there. And congratulations on that again. And so tell me, when it comes to, again, back to somebody who's going to get into speaking and getting into business and getting into, well, maybe just those two, speaking and business in general, what kind of high-level advice would you give them that's likely applicable to many people?
Well, first of all, probably the profession that's the most disparaged is selling. and I think, we have this negative vibe around selling. And again, I'm very fortunate that my dad was good at selling. My dad actually taught for Dale Carnegie years and years ago, and
really?
took their sales training program, and he worked in sales. And since I've been working and reviewing his autobiography, he did well in selling. So when I came along, he had me doing commission sales work, cold calling, all those things. And I know it makes people cringe because they feel that they're being too pushy, or they just expect people to come and buy from them. I would say that being a business person is a business, right? So, I mean, not that you can't do it as a hobby, and sometimes maybe you're happy if you have some other income, you could do it, and you'd be happy with whatever you generated in a year. But I need to feed my family. It's our only source of income for my wife and I, and our retirement. So I would just say that if you could learn to be less sales avoidance oriented, and then realize that it is a business. So because as you can imagine, if somebody leaves a job, sorry for the dog, Dundee seems to be extra upset.
She has something to chime in.
I think it's because my wife had to leave and now he's barking, but maybe I can shoo him up there in just a second. What I was going to say is that business is about. Sorry about this, Dune and listeners. Hey, buddy, come see me.
There you go.
There you go. Even the president of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers has dog issues, which is another reason why we need to take our studio out of the house.
Well, that dog wants some camera time. It's like
he might want some camera time. I could just go get him, and then I know that we're probably getting near the end. Just hold on. I'll be right back.
Go get him. I'm going to bring up another photo here. There we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be not the first appearance.
Hey!
This is Dundee. He can be a really big pain. Dundee, yeah. So he was found at the corner of Dundas and Clark Road here in London as a rescue. And so Dundee, I love how you put his name up on the screen. Thank you. And so Dundas was his name, actually. And then the other dog that was found with him is named Clark. But they felt that Dundas wasn't sexy and marketing enough, so they called him Dundee, cutened it up a little bit, and of course we adopted him. He's 13 years old, and he's been in our family for a long time. He's definitely my wife's dog, which is why when she had to go out, that's why he's complaining. But
did I get his name correctly on screen?
Dundee, you got it right, exactly.
Okay,
like Crocodile Dundee.
That's right.
That's not a knife. This is a knife.
This is a knife. Who doesn't know that? Who's growing up in was it 80 or 90s?
So what we're talking about in business, as I'm holding my dog on my lap, is just that to know that a business has. So when you first leave a job to go into business for yourself, you look at it and probably go, well, my salary used to be $40 an hour equivalent, or $60 an hour, whatever it was. So I'll charge $100 an hour. And you think, wow, that's a lot. And it is at first. But eventually you start to realize, especially in a professional services firm, that really, there should be a third left over for profit after you've paid whoever's delivering the service and whoever sold the service and any other overhead that you had. So I think it's hard for people because they don't understand the basics of maybe profit margin, overhead, or I guess the worst thing that can happen is whoever you're trying to sell to is so price conscious that you can't charge the price that you need to create the outcomes that you want. And that probably plagues a bunch of folks in our business, because one thing I would say is that selling to corporations, it's other people's money. And so therefore it's really about outcomes, confidence level, and so forth. And so, I think sometimes we're also thinking that we should just tell people that we'll do whatever they want, however they want it. And I don't think that brings confidence. I mean, that's like going to a restaurant that you've never frequented and you're just going to trust the chef to do whatever he does. You do that in a restaurant you know really well, where you know the chef, you have the trust me menu. But you don't usually do that in a place you don't know. So I do think that it helps if you can package and describe what it is that you're selling in a way, put a price tag on it that allows you to make a profit. And just remember it is a business, and business, like, again, a lot of people have negative feelings about money and about corporations and wealth and all sorts of things. And it's always interesting how that helps them. It doesn't help them in a business situation. Right? Yeah. I was lucky. My dad was into business, and I was reading Fortune magazine back as a teenager, which means I had no real life, Dune, but it helped me understand a little bit about business. And I understand business enough to have failed in business. So the other thing is, I'm not coming on as an expert necessarily. I've just learned. By the way, ping pong is another one of my little hobbies. So hopefully you can see the link here between accordion playing, trumpet playing, ping pong, skiing, and golf. I choose all the nerdy things, basically. I'm just kidding. But this was a racket that they got for my birthday. Ping pong racket. So actually behind the studio, covered with gear, is a ping pong table. And my wife has set a deadline that by December, by Christmas, that ping pong table has to be cleared and able to play ping pong. So that's another reason we're going to move the studio out of the house. Yeah.
So wonderful. Now, there's another couple photos that I wanted to pause on. There's one here with you and let me just see here. Some fine folks doing some.
Yeah. So that again, So this is a group of characters. David, my best friend, best man on the right side there, who was skiing with me, and then Alex and Chris. Chris is a longtime paramedic here in London. He teaches at Fanshawe College for paramedics. Alex works for a big oil company. So we did a trip to Nashville. We've done it a few times. And so this cast of characters, this was at a little taco place in Nashville, which is awesome. And so we're out gallivanting. Nashville is kind of like Vegas. Like when you've been to Nashville and you've gone to Broadway and all the little bars, and everyone's got live music, usually on 2 or 3 different levels. I'm sure it's been affected by COVID, but this was last summer we went there, or sorry, not last summer, but the summer before we went there together and had a blast. And we're supposed to go as couples next year. So these are the cast of characters that I normally see. Again, the roots of our relationship go back into college, or into high school, with a little bit into college as well.
Cool. Hey, in a similar fashion as we did before with, I think it was speaking and with business, I want to ask you the same things about travel. Tell us 2 stories. One is the awesome, fantastic, wonderful, just great travel trip kind of story. And one is a travel trip from, nightmare kind of a travel story. Do you have 2 of those?
Well, so I guess I should clarify. Are you talking business travel or personal travel or any travel?
Either. Just travel. Because
business travel, I just have, I guess, 2 words. Chicago O'Hare is just, I always think it's funny when an airline thinks they're helping you by saying, hey, your flight's been canceled, but we booked you on another flight tomorrow. When you have to get to wherever you're going for a morning gig. So the only times I've been stranded overnight, I think, has been in Chicago O'Hare. When we one time I remember that a flight from Detroit to Wisconsin had been canceled, and so I had to hire a limousine for about $1,500 to drive my instructor from Detroit to Wisconsin to deliver a session the next morning. And so I think he got in at 4 a.m. in the back of the limo, tried to sleep a little bit, and then he taught that day. So there's lots of headaches. There's the multi-hour delays. Probably the hardest thing is just when you're supposed to, or you're thinking in your mind you're going to get home around midnight, and then you end up not rolling in until 4 or 5 in the morning because of delays. Best travel story? On a couple of the occasions, I mean, we had a great family trip to Vegas, and the trips that Robin and I have done are amazing. But the one, the one cool thing sometimes when you're on business travel is you'll add on a personal sort of side trip, or maybe you're there over a weekend. I was up in Portland and went up to Mount St. Helens where the volcanic eruption had occurred, and just like got really immersed in what had happened. Took obviously some pictures, and so that was kind of cool. That was interesting to go in to do that. Yeah, I mean, I like travel, but I have to say during COVID, you have the one picture, that's my daughter's tattoo, Life Takes Guts, because we both have problems with our gut.
Oh, wow.
And you have a photo of me on an airplane from July of this year where I'm wearing a mask in COVID. So, and I got my pilot's license, as you saw in the one photo there, and I don't own a plane, and I just rent one every once in a while. But when I got it, my rationalization, and I have this discussion with my friend David, I said, I don't know if it's just a man thing or women do it too, but it's like there's a rationalization for every decision. And my rationalization to get my pilot's license was I was going to be able to fly from where I live in London across the lake to Pennsylvania and Ohio for business. As it turns out, that never happened. But I did, I put the time and dollars into getting my pilot's license, and have mostly, though, it's been taking people for sightseeing trips within 2 hours of where I live. Mm-hmm. So, but it was an accomplishment, and it's something that I still have my pilot's license. And at some point, who knows, maybe I will get a plane, but I've realized that flying as a private pilot, unless you get your instrument rating, so you can go in marginal or more marginal weather, it's a thing you do more for fun, because people have said, oh, why wouldn't you just, fly down to Atlanta for all that training you did down there? And I said, because it would cost me almost $2,000 to fly myself down and back. And I can only go if the weather's cooperative, and I'd have to stop for fuel halfway probably. So Air Canada will fly me for $600 or $800 return, and they very seldom will cancel. So and it's not really practical, Dune. It's like the saying is, time to spare, go by air when you're a private pilot.
Yeah. But, nice when you can accomplish one of your, I guess, I don't want to say dreams, but one of your, was it on your bucket list? Was it something that you kind of said, I want to be a pilot?
It was a goal. And, by the way, it almost starts the same way, unless you fall in love with flying, as a youngster. But, I went on a couple of, bid on a charity auction, like go fly with a pilot or sightseeing flight. And I did that a couple of times. And I said, that'd be kind of cool to become a pilot. And it was cool. I mean, it's an accomplishment. And it's something I did back when the business was technically failing, but I had decent cash flow, I guess, for a while there. So I just decided to get it done. And I will keep it, but honestly, I haven't flown in a couple of years. When you're above the age of, I think it's 40, you have to get a medical every 2 years, which is not a problem, except that you have to go back and get your medical again. So I need to go back and get my medical, get out there and get checked out again.
Yeah, cool. So, hey, Greg, when I reach out to ask you, hey, would you like to come on and chat about stuff? Were there areas that you wanted to share that we haven't gotten to yet, my friend, with all of our meandering?
You covered a lot of them. The one thing I thought we'd talk about, and I mentioned it maybe quickly, is I already mentioned the power of being uncertain about things. So I do think that people are so focused on being right and maybe not being wrong. And I'm no angel when it comes to that, but just I've even found clients will embrace uncertainty. This is what we're going to try. We'll see how it goes, as opposed to overpromising. But the other thing, and I think I've actually had this because I've had to go through exercises to distill what are my unique abilities or my supposedly my core talents. And one is that I'm constantly curious. I love wonder. And I think if you can be curious and experimental in your mindset, you don't get fixated too much as to whether things are going to go exactly as you wish. And again, having the business get into trouble helped me free myself a little bit from that. Because once you know what failure is and you can bounce back from it, you can survive from it, you can grow from it. So this idea of, let's give it a try. Let's see how it works. Even setting up this virtual studio, it's a small bet. You know, it's not a completely small bet, but it's a small bet. Mm-hmm. Might have not been the right choice. A lot of people get paralyzed at that point. You know, they want to know for sure. There's nothing for sure. You know, you want to launch a business. You don't know for sure if it'll be successful. You've got to go with some positive expectation, but be prepared to be steered in different directions. Some of our best breakthroughs as a company came just by listening to customers. We were trying to sell them one thing and they said, what about this? And that helped us develop a whole different way of viewing things. So I think this idea of curiosity, it's just a core thing that can make you better at whatever you're doing, because you're always kind of trying to discover, how could we do this?
You got to get in the game if you want to get better at playing the game. You can't get better at playing the game just thinking about the game. You got to start playing, and then
otherwise, Dune, I think we covered everything.
Yeah.
Maybe the last thing that's connected to curiosity, and it wasn't in my notes, but I was thinking about it, and I did use this in my CAPS presentations that I've done at various chapters across the country, is you got to realize that everything in life is pretty much made up. I mean, it's made up. Things are named. You know, even things like gravity. Before that, it was just a reason why we stick to the earth. But you know, somebody named it gravity. And I think in our business, you know, we have to name some of the things we do. Like, I'm broadcasting from the virtual training studio. It's really in the basement, right? And it's using technology that's widely available. But, you know, thinking though that knowing that everything is made up, I think a lot of times you think everything has to go a certain pathway. It doesn't. I mean, and if it doesn't work, you can make it up. Now, we happen to be in a business where you can make it up by basically putting a title on a presentation and a few bullet points. Mm-hmm. So that's easier than building prototypes and tools and things if you're making a product. But if you realize everything's made up, especially in the speaking business, what we say, who we say it to, how we go to market with it, what we put on our website. Mm-hmm. Now, that makes it harder because you can't just follow a formula. But I think so many of us are trying to follow some sort of ideal roadmap to a destination, when it's like, that's why anybody who says you must do this and this is the absolute checklist of whatever, I said, the only thing I know for sure is we'll probably die. And, I mean, everything else, all the journey around it, what you should eat, you know, what you shouldn't eat. I mean, there's all these debates on things. So why not just choose a path and stop fretting so much about it?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that knowing that I still fret about things, Dune. I'm just saying, you know, curiosity, everything is made up. You can make up things and follow those passions. When you get bored of them, you can always change. Yeah. And
a few weeks ago, I was in a conversation with my client and my vendor, and I said, I'm a bit of a recovering perfectionist. And my vendor guy says, you're not recovering, Dune.
So funny enough, my dad, Dune, is very much more a perfectionist. And I have perfectionism that will creep out from time to time. And it doesn't hurt if you're a pilot, by the way, to be a slight perfectionist. But I think, you know, sometimes when we look, we know it. I mean, you know, because you're laughing about it. It's like you want to make it excellent and as good as it can be without sort of going to the point where it doesn't really add a lot of extra value. Yeah, there's the picture of me on the flight in July, and I learned that I wasn't looking forward to going back to flying again. It was a very surreal experience. So I'm actually enjoying working a lot more from home. And my instructor, it's funny, I said, you know, because we'll finish a session, let's say at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And then I said, now what you really should do is go drive to the airport, wait there for 7 hours, so you get home at 4 in the morning or something the next morning. I said that would be like a real training session, whereas this one, you're done at 3 p.m., you walk out at 3:05, you're home at 3:25 with your family. So there's blessings to this as well.
You bet, absolutely. Like in every major change in life, new realities are very much different than the old ones. So different things are possible, but different things are more challenging. Look at that. That's a site for the history books, hey? With a pillow that's still in the bag there, in the plastic bag there.
Well, yeah, and they gave you at that point at least a doggy bag that had your snack in it, and I think I was actually upgraded maybe to first class in this particular photo.
Yeah.
But all that meant is they gave me a baggie with my own sanitizer and wipe, and again, this is mid-July, and then I quarantined when I came back. But it just doesn't feel great. I mean, I want, obviously, like everybody wants, I want to have a better. I want us to be able to be vaccinated so everyone feels safe, that we don't have this sense of anxiety all the time. And I've enjoyed our discussion today.
I did as well. And we're going to have you kind of wrap it up for us here. And for some of my guests, I mentioned singing, and some of them do actually sing. So feel free if you're one of those.
There won't be any singing here. Sorry, dude. I will get my accordion out. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
I don't have an accordion.
There's a little joke about the accordion, but I'm a gentleman, so I won't say it.
All right, good stuff.
But here's the thing. We're going to have you take us out by, summarizing or concluding or give us act 3 of this thing or whatever have you. But before we do that, I just want to say thanks to our viewers who are watching us live, and certainly later on in the recorded video as well. Again, you've been listening to Mr. Greg Schinkel, and of course the president of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, otherwise effectively known as CAPS. So we love CAPS. I'm a member of CAPS for the past 10 years. And, as the leader of that organization, Greg, we're going to have you to just wrap it up here. Tell us a story. Tell us some concluding remarks. Again, if you change your mind last minute and want to sing, go ahead and do that. But after you're done, though, stay in the green room for another minute and we'll give you a high five in there. So thank you again, Greg, for joining us for an hour and a bit here, and longer than a bit, actually. And so appreciate your sharing, my friend.
Good stuff. Thank you, Dune. And maybe I'll finish with a story I don't tell very often, but I remember I had 2 grandmothers that were still alive, and when I was working at General Motors in St. Catharines, my one grandmother lived in St. Catharines. Actually, so did the other one. I had 2 grandmothers. One was really my grandfather's second wife, so no blood relation to me, and she had all sorts of health issues during her lifetime. But one thing was, she'd never complain about it. She wouldn't even really talk about most of those things. She was always just happy to see you, focused on you, love. I looked forward to seeing her. She brought a smile to my face. My other grandmother, blessed with a really strong body, but a really poor attitude. Now, when I go back in her life, she had some good reason to be negative and cynical. But she complained why people wouldn't come and visit her, but it's because she wouldn't necessarily put a smile on their face when they saw her. So in my tale of my 2 grandmothers, and I think it's just something we can strive for, is that if we can learn to bring us, since we talked about both of us being smiley, if we could strive to bring a smile to the face of others, to leave, I guess, maybe positive emotional fingerprints in our interactions with people, I think we could make the world a better place.
Wonderful. On that note, I'm just going to put up a little text there so that people know what you were referring to. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Greg, and have a wonderful rest of your day, my friend.
Thank you, Dune. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Take care.